Good morning or good afternoon whenever you're watching this slide set. My name is Richard Moore. I'm a general practitioner in Somerset and I was seconded to the design team at the NHS Institute to be part of the development of productive general practice. Through these slides I would like to run through a little bit about what the support is available for the NHS England supported Time for Care program. So within that, I'd like to do a little bit about how PGP works, what the support actually is, a little bit about the modules, but I don't want to go into detail what the modules are because there's more details published elsewhere and also on our website and other websites, but thinking very much about what the commitment is for you as a practice. The whole ethos of PGP is that the output of the practices is complex and varied, and we won't really be touching that. We know that you have to do what you have to do, but what we'd like to do with you is look at the inputs, the way you achieve things, and see if we can reduce the effort to get the outputs you're getting. I say to see if. I would like just to say that this has been tried by hundreds of practices, and if you can stick with the program, because I know there's work and I know there's a lot on, you're pretty well guaranteed to get the outputs. So that's also in a different level what we're talking about today. You know that the outputs are a smoother, less clunky, more productive practice. The question is, what are the inputs? What we will do is look with you at one or two of the 6 process modules out of productive general practice. Initially, as you can see from the slide on the whole house, that there was a whole organizational change process design of which you will get access to all the materials, but it was involved in where do we want to be, and that's the getting started and making it stick module. Where are we now? That's the knowing how we're doing module. Involving patients in improvement to make sure that the changes that we make work for patients as well as the practice. Then a very large seminar around improving today's practice where we bring all that data together, which would have a sense of direction about these 6 process modules. Shaping our future practice is a different module. All these modules are about improving what you've got. Shaping our future practice is all about if I was starting for a blank piece of paper, where would I be? With the support available and the increased consultant support from our team and other delivery partners, we are able to get straight back into the process modules, helping you make the changes that will make the very quick wins, which improve morale and make it all worth doing. That actual support available will be 4 group-based learning days where the practices come together, and we will talk there about the overall approach. That's going to take half a day per session. We need, at the bare minimum, a leader, often the practice manager. But our experience is it goes better within the practice if a lead general practitioner is involved with this and jollies, at the least jollies the whole program along, at the most gets stuck in. There's something complicated about general practitioners' roles within a general practice that is a mixture of their role as owner-managers, their membership as the key workforce, and their role as leaders on setting the tone. There is nothing quite like demonstrating to the staff that this is something you're committed to by watching key individuals get stuck in as well. It's the obverse of that, though, which is so dangerous, where people think, oh, well, the key people aren't involved with this, we aren't involved in this. And the whole thing about the support that we offer you is supporting you to make the changes in your practice. And the more effort that goes in, the more change you'll get. Of course, that's not quite as simple as it sounds, because the whole reason that process improvement is so desperately needed at the moment is the practice is so heavily overworked that they need the support now, but then if they weren't overworked, then they'd have plenty of time to make the improvements. So that's our job, to help support that. We then will, after that, well, the first 2 learning days, group-based learning days, are before the program starts. Then we will do 3 practice visit days. Then we'll have a day group-based learning, and then we'll do another 3 practice visit days, and then we'll have a final wash and brush up group-based learning day adding up to 4 group-based learning days and 6 practice visits. What we'd like you to do, please, is choose 1 or 2 modules to work on. Planning and scheduling is a bigger module, and that really ought to count as 2. Whether you choose 1 or 2 will depend on your personal aspirations. The more you do, the more benefit you'll get. But on the other hand, you might feel that you're feeling a bit stretched at the moment and want to limit your investment of time. Having said that, if you really are feeling stretched and you want to limit your investment of time, it may be that the Quick Start program would work for you. And there's a different slide set around that. All the process modules follow the same structure. And when you sign up for this, you get a big box set with all the materials on the whole house that we referred to earlier. And the initial introduction there is about the module, getting started, critically defining your team. And that is obviously one of the investments that you'll make. So working your way through a module, you have to nominate team members who will have time and space to read the module and do some of the work. Within Productive General Practice, we work to make visible what is currently invisible so that you can improve the process in your practice. So in the PGP process component, we come and visit alternate weeks. In the middle week, there's often some data collection to do or some data analysis. Do not worry that you need to create what to do or whatever. There are Excel spreadsheets and there are data collection charts all made available, but this will have to be done. You will often hear us say that we help you provide data to discuss rather than argue about opinion. And later in the slides, when we look at a couple of the modules, I'll give you some examples of some of the data collection analysis that are done so that you can look at what's happening in your practice and make the changes that you want. So that's how we get to points 3 and 4 on that slide. We understand the current state by applying some well-run, well-developed and standard analysis techniques which make visible what's going on. Once it's visible, you will make clear where the clunky bits and the waste is and identify the changes. Then we'll work with you to implement those changes and critically maintain those improvements. Many of us have been part of change processes that have failed. One of the ways is that we'll work on maintenance is that we'll be really clear with you that collecting data is really important. By demonstrating to everybody that you are measuring success in improving the objectives in the goals that you have set for your practice, people start to think it's worthwhile to make the effort. Now, next I want to have a look at the 6 process modules, but within that I want to try and explain just a little bit about the implications of effort involved. First one we'll look at is front of house, and this is more than just the reception area. We know that patients' perception of general practice is as heavily influenced by their perception of things as ease of getting through on the telephone as it is the quality of consultation. So it's a matter of doing both and rather than either or. So a module team looking at front of house would perhaps consist of a team consisting of the practice manager, a head receptionist if you have someone, the whole of the reception team if you feel that would work better for you. It's the team that has real responsibility for doing the day-to-day job. And of course, much of what they do is to make appointments and facilitate roles of clinicians. So you want that clinical input on that team as well, so that any changes that are made by that team are believable and work for the wider clinical workforce, be it your nurses, your doctors, or your healthcare assistants. This is one example of a change that we might make. There would be a team would do a technique known as a 5S, which is improving the flow of work, of the identity of workplaces, and also the spaghetti diagrams, which is the flow of bits of stuff, in this case bits of paper, around the reception area. So the people doing the job were briefed on what needed to be done during a visit from the consultants. During the week in between visits, they were then able to check what was actually going on in their workplace. They were able to use the provided data analysis tools, in this case a statistical process control chart, which gave a demonstration of a marked improvement. This leads to an increase in morale because people are making improvements in their workplace under their control. This is how we actually do the sense of empowerment we talk about. And this is what it starts to look like. The next I'd like to talk about is the back office, and of course there's an artificial divide between what is back office and front office, but between these two process modules seem to deal with all the administrative support that a practice needs. The investment here needed is to make time and space for the back office team to work with the consultant to do something known as an activity capture, where we make an assessment of what comes in. Often there's far more complexity going on in the back office support than you might give first credit for. We then need to look at that with time and space to look at that using process mapping. And in the next slide, you will see once again a statistical process control chart showing the outputs of a process map, which identified there was time being wasted. And yes, it's very nice that the average time for medical report has gone down significantly. But what this chart doesn't capture, and it's tremendously important, firstly is the loss of frustration in all members of the team as they go looking for these reports, but also the time saved not having to answer the phone from insurance companies going, "Where's my report?" So the benefits in that organisation were much greater than shown on that chart. Prescriptions is in fact two modules put together. There are, first of all, the clinical decision-making component, which provides data and ways of approaching discussion around the actual act of prescribing and the choices made by the prescribing clinicians. It's not prescriptive, but promotes conversation and learning and audit and feedback. The other component is the actual efficiency and effectiveness of the repeat prescriptions process, which is how we chase what used to be green bits of paper around the surgery, but is now more a matter of the decisions around the electronic prescribing system. You can see in this slide the amount of debate and heat raised discussing the data generated by the practice about its own consultations rather than external data that was thrown at the practice. As always, working on PGP, you have to create some time with the consultant leading the conversation to generate the data which is important to the processes and outcomes that you think are important. The repeat prescription process component is typically about running processes, and again you'll need to generate a practice team that will have time to work with the consultant to understand what questions need to be done, and then some data collection in the week between the visits, and then sharing that data with the consultant so that you can get the most efficient information out of the data, so that you can then make the changes that eradicate the waste, which means you all get home a little bit earlier. In this particular example, the practice felt that it was having to crash the system frequently to provide urgent medication, where the definition of urgent was when the patient had forgotten to make a repeat prescription rather than a clinical urgency in a new clinical presentation. Referrals is also like prescriptions in that there is a clinical decision-making component and a process improvement, and that requires two different teams. Obviously, the clinical decision component is about the practitioners who make referrals, and then the process is all about the administration that supports that, that gets the referral out of the door towards its destination in the smoothest, quickest and most effective place. We all know that referrals are increasing, and once again, this is about creating information for the referrers to set their own standards and then assess whether they're meeting the standards that they set. This is not about an externally imposed target. And one of the things that needs to be pointed out, that although sometimes a benefit of practices that go through this is a reduction in unnecessary referrals, within this, it's an equal success if you see an increase in necessary referrals. The practice team necessary to realise these benefits will be heavily clinical for the clinical component, whereas the component that looks at the process will need some clinicians. The processes that you devise, slick as they are, need to work for the referrers as well as the administrator support. And so if you're feeling that these benefits would be particularly appropriate or particularly useful in your practice, this would be a module that you would wish to choose. The biggest of the 6 modules is the planning and scheduling, and that's because this is the business of the business. Patients approaching the surgery requesting a help, and many of us feel that it can be a bit busy on Monday morning, and no matter what it is we try and do, we seem to end up not quite talking about the real problem. So we do stuff about putting extras on the end, we do stuff about working late into the afternoon, into the evening and not doing the paperwork. We don't look as DNAs as a waste of time, but actually a chance to catch up. And generally, pandemonium can reign on a busy Monday morning, and those frustrations are shared by everybody in the team. The planning and scheduling module will start again from the very beginning. It will look at the demand as opposed to your capacity. It will then look at the skill mixing necessary to meet that demand. It will then look at the numbers of staff you currently have, look at the gap, and then understand if there are any changes that can be made to match capacity and demand. So we're all about freeing up efficiencies to increase the total capacity of the organisation. Now, it used to be that practices were very stable and that over many years there would be a static number of doctors and nurses. Actually, the situation is now changing and many practices are much less stable. So as people come and go, we can then use the knowledge gained by planning and scheduling to modernise and change the shape of your practice well away from the caricature of the 1948 practice of one doctor, one receptionist. One can do analysis about exactly how many clinical pharmacists could be of use, how many nurse practitioners, and that's very helpful in the modern world. Consultations is a much smaller module and is all about looking at the factors that are necessary for an effective consultation. It is very much not a Royal College of General Practitioners tutorial on how to consult. There are no models of consultation in here. But again, as everything we do, it's a question of the consultants coming in, giving you some tools to analyze what actually goes on in a consultation module. In this case, it's very much tallying up the frustrations about interruptions, tallying up the frustrations around about not having the relevant equipment, not necessarily having the right skill mix. And once that's become counted and visible, you can then start to make some changes that means these frustrations no longer exist. This is a typical experience of, particularly when you're going into a strange practice as a locum, or your locums are feeling I can't work as fast as I want because I don't know where things are. We will provide tools that provide standardization. That means everybody knows where everything is. It's important to realise, as consultations is the pivot of the general practice experience, there's a danger that consultations could be considered to cover the whole of general practice. So it doesn't cover any diagnosis and treatment. It doesn't cover prescribing, because that's covered in prescriptions. It doesn't cover referrals, because that's covered in referrals. And the number and the scheduling of appointments is actually covered in planning and scheduling. So those are the 6 modules that we offer. Within that, just to remind you that there are 4 group-based learning, 2 before you start, 1 in the middle, 1 at the end. We will then come into your practice on alternate weeks. A visit onto the practice is to generate some new ideas, some new data collection relevant to you. And of course, the early sessions are all about gathering what is relevant to you. This is different from any external imposed change process. The early parts are for us to sit down with your module team, who are experts in what happens in their practice, to work out where the likely benefits are. Then we will assess the situation, we being both the practice and the consultants, by using data collection techniques. You saw some earlier slides about timings. You saw some work in consultations about tally charts to work out where the frustrations are. We will then come back and look at this data and work with you to understand the implications, and to work with you to understand what improvements are likely to be successful. Then we can remeasure, we being both the practice and the consultants, to ensure that these improvements are getting us on the way where you need to be. Challenges: which modules are going to do? Your choice, of course. Within that, there needs to be a two-way understanding, because there's a commitment from the practices that matches the commitment from the delivery partner to come and support the practice. Nothing here that is at all frightening. We have had practice, we have turned up at practices to be met by a terribly sorry, can't do it. We understand that. However, under these circumstances, that means that there is another practice here that is not getting the support it wants. And also, of course, that practice will not make the changes that it needs to make. So we'll set out a schedule of these visits. We've heard us talk repeatedly about data, and this is what makes this program completely different from any other program. The data is critical, so as we frequently say, this will give you an opportunity to discuss data rather than argue about what you think. Your own experience, I'm sure, will lead you to agree that everything needs a leader or a coordinator, somebody who will keep the program in order, some guardian of the process. We need to know who that is so we can work with them. And or a lead GP, it's really best to nominate. The workload is not necessarily fall on the lead GP, but with their role as a key member of the workforce, often an owner manager, it's really helpful to have someone chivying the process on, supporting the process and being helpful. We'll ask you to share some of the stuff that you do. This is on 2 grounds, one of which is that it's smart to learn from your mistakes. It's smarter again to learn from other people. So within the emerging team working of general practice, it's good to have an opportunity and a space to, oh, that went well, and shamelessly steal ideas from everybody else. There's no particular pride in doing it the hard way. And also that NHS England, for this particular programme, are absolutely clear that we, the delivery partners, need to collect the data of the successes you, the practices, have had, so that we can make a case for recurrent investment in future years, so that other practices may have the benefit of the time saved and effort saved that our mutual investment has led to. What can I say? Finally, because you're worth it. The general practices are widely referred to as the jewel in the NHS crown. They are struggling with overwork, and this programme is to help free up time and make life easier. We are here to make your lives easier today and prepare you for the future, and we wish you luck.